Kitty! Kitty! Come here, kitty. Anyways, welcome to Leninist Rules. I watch bad takes so you don't have to.
For those of you who don't know who Jair Bolsonaro is, he's a fascist, but more on that later. In 2018, Bolsonaro had survived an assassination attempt and was elected president of Brazil, a country that was ruled by a US-backed military dictatorship for decades and has a history of far-right leadership being imposed on the public. Rest assured, he has opened up the Amazon agribusiness and the mining industry, because as I have pointed out in previous videos, capitalism literally cannot function without destroying the environment, and Bolsonaro, being the far-right capitalist pig that he is, wouldn't dare to throw away an opportunity to open up the Amazon to exploitation. As a result, the Amazon is burning with a quickness, as now international attention has segued their sights onto the topic. Fear not, however, because white supremacist, climate change denier, level 10 misogynist, and cult leader Stefan Molyneux is with us today, and with Brazil's environmental talking head, to reassure us that everything will be okay, and that we shouldn't concern ourselves with the profligate burning of the Earth's left lung.
Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux. I'm here with Ricardo Salles. Now, Minister of the Environment in Brazil has been pretty much the most exciting job over the last week, I would say, on the planet.
Okay, so this is our first problem. Stefan is bringing on someone who is on Bolsonaro's payroll to talk about why we effectively need to privatize the Amazon, and as I have established, standing in the center of thousands of square kilometers of burning rainforest is Jair Bolsonaro. This is like if I were to bring on a climate change denying scientist on my channel for an interview who also happens to work for Chevron Texaco. Hey, wait a second. Oh, the irony!
Now, first of all, it's not true. Amazon forest is 84% preserved, which means that for 500 years that Brazil was being discovered by the Portuguese, only 16% of the forest was used by the human presence. So which means that there's no risk whatsoever involving the Amazon forest. This is for the past 500 years, 84% preserved.
Okay, now I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just because that's so shocking to people that I really, really want people to understand that. So 500 years since Europeans first came, of course, to the Amazon, and was it 16% only has ever been used for human use?
According to forest cover calculations from Mangabe, the Amazon has about 80% of its remaining forest cover since 1970, and granted that during the 2000s there had been a considerable slowdown of deforestation up from a peak of 28,000 square kilometers of loss in 2004, all the way down to 5,000 square kilometers loss in 2014. Things are beginning to pick back up again, as now there has been an 88% increase in the rate of deforestation as of 2019. I don't know where Ricky here is getting his 84% figure from, but with the loosening up of Brazil's environmental regulations, the Amazon is on a shrinking continuum as preservation and sustainability contradicts capitalism's appetite for economic growth. And one more thing, even at a minimum of 5,000 square kilometers lost of forest per year, that is still a shit ton of rainforest, people. What we should be doing is working towards scaling back deforestation to nil and making efficient use of the resources that we already have according to plan, and backing away from economic practices that require us to clear out all this land in the first place. Alternatives do exist, after all.
What we have noticed is that for the past 20 years, previous government simply disregard the fact that we have more than 20 million people living inside the Amazon region. And these people were simply and completely disregarded. They have not been supported by public policies. They have the richest part in terms of natural resources in the country, but on the other hand, is the worst human level of development in the entire country. So it's a contradiction that we have. The richest part of the country in terms of natural resources leaves the poorest part of the people of the entire 200 million Brazilians.
Yes, the Amazon has all these resources that are fresh for exploitation. Therefore, to help the poor Brazilian people of the rainforest, whom are kept poor and desperate by US-backed far-right anti-labor regimes in the first place, we have to privatize those resources so that the Brazilian bourgeoisie can hoard the majority of it for themselves and kick down a little scraps for the poor peasants of Brazil.
Okay, so imagine this. Imagine that I'm some evil mustachio-twirling capitalist, and I say, I want to buy up half the Amazon, or a quarter, or a third, or 10%, or 5%, but I want to buy a big portion of the Amazon, and I just want to pillage it. I just want to strip mine it. I want to cart off all of the trees. What kind of barriers am I going to face in Brazil for trying to do such a thing?
First of all, it's completely illegal due to the many different pieces of legislation, but especially to the one which is called the Brazilian Forest Code. Is the most restricted piece of legislation in the entire world. No country has the slightest piece of legislation as we have, especially on the Amazon. 80%, 8% of all of the properties in Amazon cannot be touched. It's being called the legal reserve.
Yeah, not with Brazil loosening said forest code as of 2018, reducing the amount of forested land that must be legally restored, and then loosening environmental protections so that as much as 15 million hectares of tropical rainforest are now opened up to agribusiness, as well as reducing the 80% conservation mandate as low as 50%. Gotta love how Mr. Head of the Brazil's EPA talks about how much Brazil's government cares for the Amazon when they fire their scientists for reporting on increased rates of deforestation and are now taking fewer actions to preserve and protect the Amazon.
That this government, or even before, but especially this one, we are not putting in danger the Amazon. It's not correct. We are not supporting any sort of illegal activities. We are not allowing any sort of illegal activity.
I guess it's true that you're not supporting illegal activity if you've effectively made it legal to rape the Amazon.
In Brazil. And of course, you've seen the numbers, and they were sort of burned into your brain, I'm sure, by the mainstream media as a whole, that 80% increase in the destruction, the burning, and so on. I wonder if you can explain to people how these numbers came about and how they match up to historical trends.
Why are we so concerned with the 500 years of history that there wasn't an industrialized effort at destroying the Amazon for profit? Why aren't we more concerned with the fact that 1/5 of the Amazon has been burned or cut down in the last 50 years, and at the continued rate of deforestation, recovery of the forest may not be possible in the future? Just a friendly reminder that deforestation hosts a litany of dangers to our earthly habitat, from the intensification of climate change, disruption of the water cycle, soil erosion, and endangerment of countless animal species.
Okay, concerning the fires, this is the fire season. So every year, this part of the country and the neighbors as well, Bolivia, for instance, is burning. The fire is much bigger than in Brazil, and nobody makes any comments about it. But the fact is that during this period of the year, every season, we have the fire problems, especially on years that the weather is hotter and it's drier, exactly as we are facing now, 2019.
Funny, because the Amazon rainforest isn't a region of the world known for having forest fires. The Amazon isn't burning. It's being burned to make way for cattle ranching, livestock pasture, and soy farming, so the meat and dairy industry is primarily to blame for this. Behold, a rare moment of honesty from Stefan.
But as far as I understand it, correct me where I go astray, but it is mostly being done on land that has already been claimed for cattle grazing and farmland.
Statements like these help to prove my point that economic development contradicts environmental preservation. Cattle ranching is a massive black hole of resources, and if we as a society were to start rationing beef, or switch to chicken, or go vegetarian, the planet would be much better off for it.
So it's something it's almost obvious that we need to find out a way to solve the problems of legal registration and of those areas. If we don't do that, as the socialist governments didn't do for the past 20 years, they simply disregard those issues like the legal standards and the private property rights.
Excuse me, socialist governments? When was any of South America socialist for any substantial period of time? Last I checked, the US has a long history of regime change in South America, specifically for the purpose of preventing socialist governments from taking power. They did it to Brazil in the 60s, they did it to Chile in the 70s, they did it in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and are trying to do it in Venezuela right now. Wait a second, I forgot. Socialism has been redefined by bad faith actors to mean when the government does some stuff. And one more thing, just to let you cold warriors know, Cuba is the only socialist country in all of Latin America, and has been declared by the World Wildlife Fund as the only ecologically sustainable country on the planet.
So the reasons why we are facing these problems are basically connected to the fact that we don't have private property rights, we don't have an appropriate legal basis for the area.
This is the answer to everything for these people. Fuck planning for sustainability, just commodify the land. Let private owners pillage the countryside as they please. As we all know, capitalists are superhuman and would never sabotage the planet if it meant making more money. Oh wait.
We don't have a development and a plan, an appropriate development plan, which would be a sustainable development, respecting the fact that the forest must be kept.
Literally impossible under capitalism. If you force businesses to account for the environmental costs that they shift onto the habitat, virtually none of them are profitable. The drive towards surplus value extraction is too great, and whether you right-wingers like to acknowledge it or not, you cannot have a system predicated on infinite growth and exploitation on a finite planet with finite resources. The sixth great extinction and climate change are literally externalities of capitalism. Next up, Molyneux cites Bolsonaro's dumbass conspiracy theory that the burning of the Amazon could be part of a large-scale protest by NGOs against the president's administration.
So one of the things that Bolsonaro was talking about was that he had some concerns that some of the fires may be set deliberately. They may be set not for the purpose of clearing land for cattle grazing or other agricultural purposes, but as an act of sabotage, even perhaps against government or against budget cuts. Have you heard anything about that stuff?
Interesting, because when asked to substantiate this claim with some proof, he stuck his head in the sand and gave a non-response. The mental gymnastics and invocation of conspiracy theories that rightists have to employ to explain away the problems in society that are clearly sourced to capitalism is quite astounding.
First, it began when we simply cut off the financing for NGOs who were living for 20 years by spreading out these problems. And some of them are serious. Some of them have important important things that were done in the past. But there's a huge number of them that have been fundraised money, including the governmental funds, to do things that are not connected to the efficiency, have not resulted in the reduction of the deforestation. I mean, simply it's a narrative that they use to collect funds. And we simply cut off those public funds.
What a wonderful excuse to gut funding to NGOs fighting to preserve the Amazon. They haven't done enough, or they haven't done anything, therefore defund them. It's the same excuse that they use to defund the VA or any other public utility in the United States. First, claim that said publicly funded utility is useless and inefficient, then deprive funding from said publicly funded institution, rendering it useless and inefficient, and then a year later claim, look how inefficient this publicly funded institution is. It's almost like if you take resources away from someone, they won't be able to work as well as if you give them what they need to do their job.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, do you think that they used contacts in the media in an attempt to drum up a kind of hysteria with the goal of getting said funding restored?
Exactly. It's a circle. It seems like a circle relationship. Some of them are connected to the academia. Some of them are connected to the media. Some of them are connected to the foreign NGO as well. And there's an entire campaign, first of all, because they don't like Bolsonaro. It's a right-wing conservative government. And since they are left-wing socialist people, some of them, they are against Bolsonaro no matter what we do. So in addition of that, they're using their contacts worldwide to pressure the government due to the fact that we cut off the funds.
Those evil environmentalists using their connections and resources to bring attention to the sacking of the Amazon rainforest and the destruction of Earth's ecosystem. The evil Jew commie conspiracy. It's like they're acting like this is the only planet we have.
Brazilian society have recognized that some of those people have simply used the flag of the environment for their own benefit, to raise funds, to pay their own salaries, to pay the payroll of the NGOs.
Pretty ironic hearing a bunch of capitalists bitch and whine about people trying to line their own pockets. Meanwhile, there has been rampant and widespread protesting all across Brazil against Bolsonaro's decision to profligate the Amazon. For the next couple of minutes, rather than address the massive uptake in deforestation in the Amazon, the two of them decide to propagate more conspiracy theories about how the media is taking things that the Brazilian government officials have said out of context, and how the Jew-run liberal media has it out for anyone to the right of Chairman Mao.
Well, and of course, I think this is another example of just how, when you look at the mainstream media, anyone who's to the right of Chairman Mao is, automatically someone to be taken out, to be undermined, to be often lied about, to be quoted out of context, to be just attacked.
Oh, boo-hoo! Woe is me! I'm a right-winger, I'm a victim! Even though capitalism, the system that I promote, is the dominant economy of today, I'm the victim! Boo-hoo! Aren't you people supposed to be rugged individualists? Aren't you the group of people that's supposedly above cultivating victim cults?
And this is you see this, of course, with Trump. When I was younger, I saw it with Margaret Thatcher. You can see it with a wide variety of people who are not on the left, that it really is this monolithic wall of attack with very little grounding in reality.
The right wing is the status quo, dude. Very rarely do you hear about the mainstream media attacking Thatcher or Reagan or what have you. The reason why the mainstream media is covering the Amazon story is because it can be sensationalized. It draws attention, hence media view, hence profit. The thing that you caps think is good and morally right no matter what.
if they look into the Brazilian behavior in terms of the environment, we are very proud to say that Brazil is very sustainable. Our agriculture is sustainable. The forest is maintained. As I mentioned, 84% is a huge percentage. If you look into the European forest, they have been devastated after time after time, and we continue to have ours by 84% after 500 years of occupation.
What is the basic message that you would like to get across? We've touched on it, of course, here and there, sustainability and the massive preservation of the Amazon. But if you had a sort of megaphone to the world, which is this to some degree in a nutshell, what is it that you would like to say in particular against the narrative that has been coming out of the mainstream media over the last week or two?
First, we are aware that we need to conserve, to preserve the Amazon. We are doing that. We want to bring the capitalist involvement on that in terms that we provide and develop the private initiatives over there. If we don't bring the economic development to the region, it becomes very complicated to keep it at it.
Okay, so I think we've all heard enough of this bullshit. Nowhere in this video do they refute the obvious facts that there has been a massive spike in the rate of deforestation under the Bolsonaro administration, or the massive public upheaval taking place not only in Brazil, but in countries around the world protesting action taken by the far-right government. Instead, Stefbot and his boy Ricky here go on to adulate the private sector as the solution to the problem, when leaving it up to the private sector is what is wrecking the forest in the first place. From the consolidation of wealth and power into the hands of a few, to the depression of wages, planned and intrinsic obsolescence, the wasting of resources on rents, advertising and dividends, and the undemocratic decision-making of the firm on what to do with the resources. With respect to environmental sustainability, the right wing has no solution to this problem. The only thing that they are concerned with is economic development, and even within that context, it's going to be the propertarians whom reap the lion's share of the benefit at the expense of the Amazon and the poor people of Brazil. If you really want to sow the seeds for uplifting the Brazilian poor, then let the workers own the fruits of their labor. Stop with the economic system that is only concerned with profits. Plan an economy that can directly balance the needs of the public with what is sustainable for the habitat. In other words, a socialist planned economy. But you won't get that with a Bolsonaro presidency because he's a fascist. The man is an open supporter of the 20-year US-backed military junta that took place in Brazil, the overthrow of the democratically elected left-wing president João Goulart, and by extension is an advocate for fascist dictatorship, is a homophobe, a misogynist, a pathological bullshitter, and an advocate for eugenics. All in all, the guy's a piece of shit, and it's a shame that his assailant wasn't successful. Anyways, credit to Stefan. This Ricardo fellow was a great man to bring on to his show to justify his grift.